Alrighty, so week 9, I hope, will be something you enjoy as far as the learn together. I've been talking about, since I think week 3, the idea of a virtual environment. And so I've spent the last day or so actually getting it to work on my local system. And I've found that through the dev projects that we've done, probably half of you, maybe less, but around a good part of you used external libraries. And we've seen this from the Automate the Boring stuff, where he did the clipboard, where he copied the whatever was on the command line so you could paste it, that library. So I've been feeling for a while I want to give you an experience of if you are going to, and here's the part I just want you to understand before we start into what you need to do. So, and this is a good jumping off point for us just to have a short discussion, because I've been thinking about it today, about our next develop, right? So here we are at week 9, and if I scroll through 10, 11, 12, right? So in the end of October 29th is our next dev project. And I don't have a solid, so just know that what you're about to see is just a draft of some of my first thoughts. What happens is, as I work through the content as well, I clarify what I'm about to show you, but I at least want to give you an idea. And also at this point, right, your feedback, your input, would be helpful. So for Dev 1, right, you can either use your Dev 0 concepts or select something different. It's really up to you. We have done get user input, but you could still use that, or you could use args like we saw this time in the section 9, or read an external file, but you have to get user input some way. Store that input into or process, and really it's like you get input, you process it, and then you store that to a file. Typically, you don't just go straight to a file. You do some kind of processing. Like for me, in my RPS game, I would actually, if I was to give it an external file, I would actually have it rounds of it playing, right? And then the process data would be the wins and losses. And then read from that file. So write to the file, read from the file, and generate summary data. And then this is where I'm not totally sure, because there's various ways we can use regular expressions. We've started that this week. We'll finish it next week. Our Learn Together for week 10 will cover that, right? Handle. So I'm not sure exactly, but we'll have a better idea once we get through that. But I'm thinking, right, handle, use regular expressions for input or other related processing, because you really see the power of regular expressions like many functions. So handle errors on input, reading and writing data, right? And then here's the other one, is add some Python functionality / commands that we've not seen in this course so far. So at least one example of that, right? So again, this is just a very beginning draft, and we're at this point in week 9, 3 weeks away from that. Okay, so now here's why I'm bringing you back here, is that at some point along the way, you're probably going to want to use an external library. And it's kind of not a good practice to install these into your system globally. And what that means is whenever you install them, it puts them to where they're accessible anywhere on your system. And you like to be able to kind of isolate that. And this is a very common practice. We especially see this in other programming languages. And so there's something, and I learned this as I was actually doing this work, that there's something built into Python already for this. And this was the recommendation I was given, was to use virtual env. So I'm going to show you how it works. So you're going to do really 2 things here, and I want to slow down and hopefully be clear about what we're doing. Right, so the general instructions for doing env are here, and we'll come back to that when you do your own. But for the install mine, right, you're watching the library, the video here to do this. And so what I want you to do is to attempt this, right? See if you can get this done. So the first thing, and this is one of those, I just have to put up a little cautionary thing. You're going to clone my public repo. Now, let's just be clear about this. You're going to see me do this in a moment. You never push to this repo because it's mine, but you can, once you clone it, you might, so it's git clone and then the name of the repo, and you could get that off of GitHub, right? And then, so first you would clone it. And I'm going to actually show you this part inside of my Windows environment because I know many of you are using Windows as well. And then when I'm done with that, right, so I'll show you how to do that. I'll walk you through how to actually run, bring my code into your local system, set up a virtual environment, install the libraries. I'll show you how that works. And then I'll turn to creating your own. Okay, so I actually might end up doing this part in a separate video just because this might get a little bit long. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so I'm going to turn over here. By the way, just because I think it might be worth remembering. I know it's been a while. So to clone, right, you copy that. Now, in my case, and I would recommend this in yours, like I'm going to pull over my Windows environment real quick, right? What you can do here, so I would do it, you could do it into a separate directory. I keep all of my, like I clone your private repos right before I grade dev 0, or in this case, when we do 1, I'll pull your code. So in this case, I've, cloned it, right? So you will, if you do this step, you will either see a new folder in this directory, or if you put it somewhere else, that's cool too. So again, I'm telling you, right? So that's where once you go into that directory, whatever it is, right? And this is, let me just actually create a new, open a new terminal here. Right, so this is going in here. This is where you do git clone, and then you would paste that URL that I showed you, and that would create in yours. So from here on out, if you do it there, you'll see it. Okay, so that's step 1, is clone it. And this is like the idea of you getting somebody else's code, which, by the way, if we were really doing this in the real world, you typically would do something called forking it. And it's basically taking a copy of their code at that point. And the reason I'm not going to do fork is that there may be other times you want to pull code from my public repo or possibly somebody else's, okay? You could look in the replies at this point, maybe somebody has actually done this process already, okay? So I'm going to change into my public repo. Now this is on my Windows machine, not on my Mac. On my Mac, I have a lot more folders. No big deal. So now that I've cloned it, I'm going to do a git pull. Now I'm doing a git pull because since I've set this up, I've done some changes to this folder. And this is the part now, right? So in week 9, right? So if I open this up, I see that there's a py file, my app.py, there's a README file, and there's a requirement text file. So if you open up the README file, you can see that I've provided you, and this is in terms of a markdown file. So I'm going to actually render it. You could actually look at this on GitHub, or you could just render this file. Now, this is my virtual. Now, this is actually a more classical virtual environment because it's my Windows environment. So now what I'm going to do is look at this file rendered. So I'm going to clone. So this is a rendered markdown file, easier to read, right? So clone my local repo into your local system. This is what we just did. Create a new virtual environment inside the week 9 directory. And this is the command that you use right here, okay? So for me, I'm actually going to do this too, because at this point, this code requires a third-party library. As a matter of fact, Javier showed me this, and it's kind of fun to use, so you'll see it. and it's to do fun banners on the command line when you get input. So what I'm going to do here is just to make sure I'm in that directory, and then I'm going to change into week 9. Cool. So because this is already built into Python, let me just go ahead and clear so you can see this. Because this is already built in to Python, and I think for me, I ended up having to do Python 3 here, -m, and then I said venv, and that's the argument that tells it, okay, we're going to create a virtual environment, and now is going to be the name that you want to give it. Okay, now you could call it anything because it's going to create a folder. Now the key is you want to be in that folder when you do it. So I'm going to call mine demo. Okay, so let's see if that works. Oh, helps when you spell Python, right? Rio-m demo. Of course. Let me think here. What did I do wrong? All right, let me pause. This is that, you got to figure it out because something always happens. Interesting. So in this case, it's actually working at it. I needed to put Python instead of Python 3. Not entirely sure. I think it has something to do here with the path. And so this is going to take a moment, right? So now it finished, and take a moment to look up in your list here if you haven't used, if you use some other type of Git, you can do Git status here. Like you could do a Git status and you'd freak out because look at all these files that added, right? So it added all that directory, but here it actually shows you the number of files. So the first thing you want to do, by the way, I need to close this. I just went and looked real quick, right? So now that I've done that, I need to immediately add some git ignore, okay? So what I'd want to do, right, in this demo directory is now I'm going to add, and we did this first week, a git ignore. Now when you do that, and I want you to see this, so I want to be slow and deliberate here. We could put some content, but all I'm going to do, because this is a git ignore just for this folder. And so if I just put star, what that says is ignore anything in that directory. And this, by the way, notice immediately then that all those files are ignored in this demo directory from my GitHub, which is what you want. Okay, when you downloaded my code, I didn't want you to bring in all those folders. I wanted you to run it on your local system. Okay. All right, so I'm going to clear my terminal again, and we'll just look back. Again, here's my git ignore. Now I do need to version control that, but even that file, notice it immediately worked. Okay, so you do want to get version control that. All right, so we did step 2. And now we're going to activate. Now this is where, depending on your system, now this is actually right here because I wrote my instructions, and this is, it took me a little while to do this. And this is where I gave you a Mac versus Windows, and I'm kind of curious why I'm not seeing it on the print. Oh, that's why, because I'm actually looking at the second file you will look at. So let me go back here. Because this is going to be different now because you're going to activate it. So now we're actually going to activate the local environment, okay? So on Windows, I found out it's just a little different command. Okay, so actually what I'm going to do is, and I don't think you have to here, I could move into the demo, but I don't actually have to, because notice my instruction says dir name, because you could have called it something besides demo. So I'm going to say source, mine's demo. Oh, and really important on the Windows side, and I got to remember where I'm at on the Windows side, I would do dot demo dot, and this is scripts. So just to stop here for a minute and realize what you did by doing the virtual environment, you actually created a fully contained Python environment. and the scripts that you're going to install here in a minute. And again, it's going to be CIT packages if you're on Linux or Mac, right? In that case, one of the file you need to run is, in this case, to activate the virtual environment, is actually scripts /scripts activate. And let's make sure I named it right. Good. Activate. Okay, so if I got it right, if I didn't, I'll get it. Now I'll immediately know if I got it right, and here's how I know. It changes the command line to reflect that I'm in demo now. Now I should have done this before, but now if I do which Python, it'll actually show me that it's actually running the Python within that directory, that demo. So it's isolated that folder and that environment. So now comes the part where we actually install. Okay. Now, by the way, if you were really doing this for reals, you would write probably a script to let the user just run a script, and it would do all this for them. Now, you don't want to assume everybody wants to do a virtual environment, because what happens if they don't care if it installs in their local systems? They don't have to do this part. They would just do this part that we're going to do next, okay? And I'm going to show you how to create this file, this requirement file, in the second video, okay? So here we go. Now that I'm in that directory, now I can type pip3 install -r requirements.txt. Now, before I do that, if you just look in here, it's actually only going to install one library. And I'll show you again in the second one how to create this, okay? So that's all it's going to install, but here's the key. It's only going to install it in this structure that I'm on, that I've created, in this virtual environment that I've created. So let's see if it works. Cool. So this PyFiglet is cool because you'll see it run in a minute. And it's installing it, but again, it's only installing it into that, for me, on Windows scripts. Again, if you're on Linux or Mac, then it's under bin. I'll show you maybe in a minute where that's at. But anyway, so now check it out. I actually have done that. So now I actually just need to do the last step, which is to run the code. Now the code in this case is very simple. Okay, here we go. So now we've done step 5 where we installed it. And so now we just run the code. All right. So in this case, I think I learned on I had to go Python 3. And now what's the name is my app.py. Maybe it was just Python, my app.py. Oh, it was. I have to look at that. I think it's the way when it isolates. So in this case, and I guess that's why in my instructions, right? So this is cool, right? So first we'll just look at the code real quick. But what this did is it ran this code right here, right? Which is importing, right? Because you've already installed this library, and so now in your code you're just importing it, and then you're just printing, and it's called, and you can look up the documentation here, but whatever you pass. Oh yeah, see, I'm getting all kind of linter errors here, which is okay. Python's doing a little bit of work for me, or my VS Code is trying to help me out. So in this case, I just want to show you, really, and this is kind of a fun way to do, right? Because we all kind of tried to make that fun, or at least look consistent, and this is a great way to do it. So I'm going to erode that, and it says hi Rio. Okay, all right. So here's the deal. I am gonna actually stop before I do the next one, because I just want to. Let me go back to my here, right? So in here, what we've done here is we've done this first step, right? So this video is for that. So now I'm going to stop, and I'm actually going to show you how to do this for your own. And I want you to, and we'll talk about that next. But what you would reply here is like, were you successful in doing that? Or did you run into any issues doing that? All right, look for the second one.